On a warm July morning in 2014 in Tallahassee, Florida, a brilliant law professor, father of two, and beloved friend, Dan Markel, pulled into his driveway. Minutes later, neighbors heard a loud pop, then another. Dan had been ambushed in his own car, shot execution style, and he would not survive. Who would want to kill Dan Markel? He wasn't a drug dealer or a man with dangerous enemies. He was a Harvard-educated law professor who lived for his students, his children, and his family. But as detectives dug deeper, they uncovered a family feud so bitter it would end in murder for hire. Welcome to Bed Crime Stories podcast. I'm your host, T. Do me a favor, smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. I am not monetized, so if you want to support my work, please consider a Patreon membership. At the center of this feud, Dan's ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, and her wealthy South Florida family. Wendi and Dan's marriage had collapsed, and their custody battle over their two boys was absolutely vicious. Wendi's mother, Donna Adelson, hated Dan with a passion, seeing him as the reason for her daughter and her grandsons being stuck in Tallahassee, Florida, where he worked. Emails later uncovered show Donna pressing Wendi relentlessly to move the boys back home to Miami, even suggesting that the Adelsons pay Dan $1 million to agree to this. But Dan Markel loved his children, and he enjoyed being a father more than anything else, so naturally he refused. And Dan also had a trump card. He knew that Wendi had lied about some things during their divorce, specifically assets, and Wendi, as a lawyer too, could be disbarred for being deceptive about such things. So her career was also hanging in the balance. Dan Markel was a threat to that. Investigators believe that when that $1 million couldn't solve the Dan Markel problem, murder became the answer. Here's what the prosecutors say. They believe the Adelson family conspired together. Donna and her son Charlie allegedly bankrolled the plot. Charlie's girlfriend, Katherine Magbanua, served as the go-between. She's the person who hired two men from Miami, her ex, Sigfredo Garcia, and Latin Kings gang member Rivera, to carry out the hit. On July 18th of 2014, Garcia and Rivera drove 450 miles from Miami to Tallahassee. Once there, they trailed Dan Markel throughout his morning. They followed him as he dropped his two children at daycare. They were captured on security camera video outside Dan's gym, waiting for him as he completed his workout. And when Dan drove home, they were there right behind him. Now, Dan was on the phone at the time, and when he pulled into his garage, he kept the car running for a few seconds as he spoke on the phone. And this is when Garcia and Rivera made their move. Rivera kept the car running. He was the driver. Sigfredo Garcia got out of the car, went into Dan's garage, and he pulled the trigger as Dan sat trapped in his car. Dan Markel did not die instantly, but the injuries were such that he would end up brain dead, and he would die in the hospital the next day. And just like that, Dan Markel was gone, and his two little boys no longer had their father. Dan Markel died at Tallahassee Memorial Healthcare 14 hours after he was shot. The next day, a memorial service was held in his honor by the congregation Shamrai Torah. The Tallahassee police immediately attempted to piece together what happened on the day of Dan Markel's death. They quickly determined that this was no random act of violence. and they set out on a journey to find out who unalived Dan Markel and why. It turned out that when the getaway car tore out of the driveway and neighborhood, one of Dan Markel's neighbors heard these sounds and looked out the window of his home. He spotted a greenish Prius. He went over to Dan Markel's house, and he's the person who discovered Dan in the car. He called 911 and told the operator his driver's side window is shattered and he's spattered and can't answer. He's inside the car is running, and he's got blood all over his head. He's not responding to me, end quote. The Tallahassee police located Markel's ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, early that afternoon at a local restaurant where she was having lunch with friends. They took her down to the police station without explaining the details of what had happened. When they explained that Dan had been shot and he was at the hospital and he wasn't going to survive, Wendi said, "Oh my God, what happened? I just don't understand. How could this happen?" Her interview went on for more than 5 hours. During the interview, Wendi let it out that her parents hated Danny. She said her parents didn't think that Danny treated her very well. She also let it slip that her brother Charlie Adelson had once threatened to hire hitmen to unalive Dan during their very contentious divorce. During their investigation, the police noticed that Markel had been stalked by 2 men in a Prius before he was shot. And the police in 2015 obtained a video shot from a city bus, believe it or not, of what they believe to be the same green Toyota Prius. And although you can't see the driver or read the license plate in the video, a toll transponder can be seen in the windshield of the Prius. This told investigators that the perpetrators were not from Tallahassee because there are very few toll roads surrounding the city. Based on the image of the toll transponder seen in the car, the police then pulled the toll records for all Toyota Priuses heading into Tallahassee around the time of the crime. The toll records led them to a car rental agency in Miami, Florida, that rented mostly hybrid cars. It turned out there were fewer than 10 Toyota Priuses rented during this period in the state of Florida. They soon narrowed it down, and the rental agreement for that particular Prius showed that it was rented by a man named Luis Rivera. And again, Rivera was the leader of the notorious Latin Kings gang, and a second telephone number was also on the rental contract with the word brother written beside it. The listed cell phone tracked back to one Sigfredo Garcia of North Miami. Garcia was a childhood friend of Rivera's, who also had a felony record and numerous run-ins with the law. Using cell phone data and GPS info, police were able to trace the trail of Rivera and Garcia in the Prius, and it put the 2 men in the vicinity of Markel's home in Tallahassee at the time of the crime. So now they had their hitmen. It wasn't until May of 2016, 2 full years after Markel's death, that the police announced first-degree unaliving charges against Rivera and Garcia. And it wasn't long after that the police made a connection between Sigfredo Garcia and Charlie Adelson. Charlie was Dan Markel's brother-in-law, Wendi Adelson's brother, and Donna Adelson's son. Yeah, this guy. It turned out that Charlie had been dating Sigfredo Garcia's ex, Katherine Magbanua. Sigfredo and Katherine had 2 children together. And basically, it came out that Charlie had asked Katherine, "Do you know anybody who could hurt somebody?" And she said yes. Katherine was the go-between when Charlie Adelson offered to pay for the hit on Dan Markel. And Katherine enlisted Sigfredo and Luis to do the job. The Adelsons ended up putting Katherine Magbanua on their payroll at Patriarch Harvey Adelson's dental practice, and payments were seen to be flowing from that business to Katherine Magbanua after the crime. Eventually, Sigfredo, Garcia, Rivera, and Katherine Magbanua ended up in prison for their roles in this crime. And later, Charlie Adelson was charged for his role in the conspiracy to unalive Dan Markel, and he too was found guilty, and he is now behind bars for the rest of his life. Well, after Charlie was convicted, the police set their sights on Donna Adelson, the matriarch of the Adelson family. They were able to link her to Magbanua through those checks made out to Katherine from the dental practice. And the cops had the evidence. There was cell phone data showing numerous contacts between Katherine Magbanua, Charlie Adelson, and Sigfredo Garcia before and after the murder, along with contact between Garcia and a phone registered to Charlie's father, Harvey Adelson. So yes, it would appear that perhaps Harvey was in on all of this as well, although he has yet to be charged. Rivera actually pleaded guilty, and he testified against the others, and he implicated them in the murder-for-hire plot. Now, in 2016, 2 years after the crime, the FBI launched a risky operation which they called the Bump. This is when an undercover agent approached matriarch Donna Adelson on the street, posing as an associate of the hitmen, Garcia and Rivera. The agent hinted that he knew what her family had done, and he demanded more money from them. Well, Donna was just absolutely panicked. She ran home to her high-rise condo in Miami, and suddenly there was a flurry of panic calls between Donna and Charlie, calls that were caught on FBI wiretaps. In one of those, Charlie reassured his mother, saying that if the undercover agent really knew something, they would have gone to the police, not to us. Donna and Charlie spoke in a cryptic code, and they referenced a TV that they could not return. To the prosecutors, this was evidence that the Adelsons were trying to cover their tracks. After the bump, the FBI secretly recorded Charlie Adelson meeting with Katherine Magbanua at Dolce Vita, a Miami restaurant. On the muffled tape, Charlie nervously discussed the extortion attempt, telling Magbanua that if the hit had been done for the Adelson family, they'd already be in trouble. Prosecutors argued that this was essentially a confession, a nervous co-conspirator, Charlie, trying to reassure himself that the walls weren't closing in on him. But again, one by one, the conspirators faced justice. Rivera, the getaway car driver, cut a deal, admitting his role and testifying for the state. Sigfredo Garcia was convicted of first-degree you-know-what and sentenced to life. Katherine Magbanua was eventually convicted, and she too was ultimately handed a life sentence, even though at one point she was offered total immunity if she would rat out the other people and Charlie Adelson. She refused to do that, very stupidly, because she went to trial, and sure enough, they found her guilty on her second trial. The first jury could not come to a conclusion. So it was in November of 2023, after so many years, Charlie Adelson was convicted of orchestrating his former brother-in-law, Dan Markel's murder. But even then, the story wasn't finished. The Adelson family matriarch, the person believed to have come up with the idea for this crime, was still free. So in the same month that Charlie Adelson was convicted, Donna Adelson, on November 13th of 2023, she was stopped at the Miami International Airport with her husband Harvey, in her hand a one-way ticket to Vietnam, a country with no extradition treaty with the United States. To the prosecutors, this was not a vacation. It was a clear attempt to escape prosecution. Donna had seen the writing on the wall. She knew that the prosecutors were going to come for her next. Later that night, Donna was arrested and she was charged with first-degree unaliving, conspiracy, and solicitation to commit an unaliving. Now, Donna Adelson's trial is going to begin today, and the case against her is built on the following evidence. Wiretaps of her panic calls with Charlie after the FBI bump where the agent approached her. The Adelson family's emails in which Donna was pressing Wendi to move back to Miami and do whatever she could to convince Dan Markel to let her go with their 2 boys. Financial records showing money funneled through the Adelson dental practice to pay Garcia, Rivera, and Magbanua. Then there's the Dolce Vita restaurant recording, which tied the family to the conspiracy to unalive Dan Markel. And finally, there's Donna's attempt to escape to Vietnam, proof, the prosecutors say, of a guilty conscience. Some will say this is a mountain of circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors believe all of this shows Donna was not just aware of the plan, but she helped orchestrate it. So don't be fooled by that white hair and the little old lady look, in my opinion. So nearly a decade after his brutal death, the quest for justice in the case of Dan Markel continues. The hired guns are behind bars. The middle person, Katherine Magbanua, is locked away. And now the alleged mastermind, the Adelson family matriarch, Donna, is facing the trial of her life. Will the jury believe she was the puppet master, or will they see her as just a grieving mother caught in a web that was spun by her son, Charlie Adelson? And if Donna gets convicted, it is believed that prosecutors will once and for all go after Dan Markel's ex-wife, Wendi Adelson. After all, she's the person who had the most to gain from his death. And then there's also her father, Harvey Adelson. Will Harvey remain free? Is there simply not enough evidence to tie him to the crime? Only time will tell. So this was a quick and dirty review of the Dan Markel case. If you want to go into a deeper dive on it, I have an entire series about this case. And the videos are really good if I say so myself. Please smash that like button. Please subscribe to the channel. Please have a great day, and I will see you next time on